What's going on, everybody? This is Paul-Octave Hebert, or Byron Barville in the real world, doing a textbook analysis video where I will be going over Globe Fearon American history. This is for SCC 352, Student Diversity, Critical Performance number 1, and let's just jam right into it. In this speech, I will be covering state and national standards, diversity, readability and usability interest, and the analyses of these three, pro and cons, and some conclusion of this text. The 5 standards that I chose was: does the book cite support good primary and secondary sources? Does the book pull central ideas well from these sources in a well thought out manner? Does the book distinguish among fact, opinion, and reasoned judgment inside the text? These 3 are the core content standards. The last 2 is: does the book demonstrate how geography influences the lives of people in social studies? And does the book show how advances technology and science influence people in social studies as well? And these are the Kentucky Education Social Studies standards. The first one, I chose strongly agree on this one, and I saw this about 52% of the time in the text, is because you see examples such as Pain and English ones on page 175 in the book. Also, I forgot to mention earlier, I'm doing chapters 8 and 18 for review, which is the American Revolution and Reconstruction. Awesome. Now, going back to the speech. We will be going over the Ross Fortin examples on page 442 and 444 respectively. Those are both good and primary sources because Paine's speech was a letter straight from his journal. In English, it was part of his naval record that they used. And Edmund Ross's was a very good source dealing with President Johnson's impeachment in the 1860s. And Elizabeth Fortin was a school teacher during Reconstruction, and she was a black woman that was teaching the first freedmen in there. These are very good primary sources, so I gave it a check. It was 52%. I saw this in the time in both of them. Now, were these ideas pulled well from the sources? Yes, they were, but they needed some work. The 2 things that Paine and English talked about in page 175 was independence or reconciliation with the British Crown. These were pulled out, but they weren't singled as those are the topics they were choosing from. They didn't really pull those ideas very well from that. Also, Edmund Ross, impeachment, a decision to impeach or to not impeach was pulled out, and also black freedmen education, also in Reconstruction. That idea was pulled out of those sources, but it could have used some work and really, saying what those sources were. So that's why I checked agree, and 48% of the time I saw this in the text. Did it distinguish among fact, opinion, or reasoned judgment very well? Well, not really. That's why I disagree with that. That's why I checked that, because independence is an opinion, and so is reconciliation. And also, it's an opinion whether or not black people really had a true education after the Civil War, or whether Edmund Ross was wrong or right when he decided to vote for President Johnson. It was never distinguished as a fact, opinion, or a reasoned judgment in all of these sources that I analyzed. So that's why I disagreed with that. It could have used some more work on that, and 16% of the time I saw this in chapters 8 and 18. Does it show geography and advances in science and technology? Not really, because it does on the earlier part of in like G915 of the book. It shows a lot of geographical terms and explanations, but when you go onto the map, like in the American Revolution, it doesn't show the Allegheny Mountains. It doesn't show the swamps in the backcountry of the South where the militias and the British Army fought. And it doesn't really show any science or technology that came after the Civil War. It does show some of it, but not very much. But to be honest, this really wasn't a science textbook, so the authors weren't really impelled to talk about this. But geography, they were very impelled to talk about, but they just didn't do it. So that's why I checked, disagreed on both of those. They very much so need some work, 16% on both of them. Diversity lens. These are 5 questions that I talked about. I talked about ethnic background, gender, intellectual ability, equal respect to people of cultures, and the language that someone may speak. And here are the questions likewise that I followed on. You can rewind the video if you want to reread all those questions due to time. I don't really have time to read all the PowerPoint slides at one time, so we're just going to move on. Here's the chart, the Likert chart that I picked for that. Ethnic background. Especially on page 175 of the text, it had a painting of black cavalry American soldiers, and also a side portrait of Jean-Francois Castillo, who was a French infantry officer who fought for the United States cause during the American Revolution. It was a lot of very much ethnic background, and it had a lot of portfolio pictures inside the text that showed a lot of people with different ethnic backgrounds. They hit the nail through the wood, strongly agree. 50% of the whole book was full ethnic background. Was there equal respect among genders? Yes, there was. There were a lot of pictures of women like Amelia Earhart and Betsy Smith. and they were on page 570 and 573, and Miriam Ferguson was on page 574 when women were gaining women's rights. And they did show a lot of people before the women's suffrage movement going on in there, but there were still a lot of men in this text. I really felt like it could have used more women, especially during the American Revolution. There was no picture of Betsy Ross or Washington's wife or any of them pictures, so it was kind of biased in that regard. So that's why I checked agree. And 20% of the time it did show equal respect among genders. Respect to intellectual ability, I disagree with that. And about 15% of the time you saw this in the text, because there really wasn't any activities for high achievers or for students with high intelligence quotients in the book. The book was kind of lowbrow for the middle schoolers who may read this text, so the book needed some work in this area, so that's why I checked disagree about 15% of the time. Culture and linguistics, it was kind of just a home run. I strongly disagree with it. The book was very Anglo-centric and America-centric because, well, it's an American history textbook. But the authors need to understand that not everyone in the United States comes from an Anglo-Saxon background. They don't come from a Protestant background. And the book also needs to understand that, I mean, history is just not written by the winner. It's written by the people in their hearts and what they felt like. Real history is written from a real social scientist knows what they're talking about. And language, the book was just written in English. It didn't really have any secondary text for people of the non-Anglo phone world. And the book could have really put out there, like maybe added some things in Spanish or another language that's strong in the world who may read this text, such as other history texts are going on right now that's kind of on the range. But I strongly disagree with culture and linguistics, and 7.5% of the time. RSI levels, the Lexile number was 970, minimum reading level 6 through 8th grade, interest level 6 through 12th grade. Flesch Kincaid score was about an 8th grade score, and Gunning Fogg score is also 8th grade. You can go on readabilityscore.com to type in a paragraph of this book if you have it, and type it in. That's how I figured it out. It counted the syllabi of this text through a paragraph, and it can go to the score through a complex mathematical formula on how it did this. So it's basically an 8th grade reading level, this book is. General overview, you can read this for yourself, but overall it was an average textbook. It's a good remedial source for middle school and I went blank. It's a good remedial source for middle school students. I gave it a C- personal rating because of the lack of knowledge, economic and histography rating. It lacks intervention enrichment activities. RSI decency was a strength. Decent teacher support. It had good assessment utilization. And these are pretty much the strengths and weaknesses of how I viewed the book. You can go back and read it if you want to. Alright, let's have some fun. Here's some quotes that I took out about reading that you might like. Don't just read the easy stuff. You may be entertained by it, but you'll never grow from it. Book to read is not the one that thinks for you, but the one that makes you think. In the tongue of Descartes, reading is when something darkened or hidden is penetrated to the light. So when man in reads, light is split and the truth comes out. A good book is like a good treasure or candy. It can fill your senses with wonder, take you on big adventures, it can make you rich beyond your wildest dreams. Here's the bibliography of the text. If you have any questions or comments, just leave them in the comment section below. I'd love to hear back from you, especially if you're in SEC 352. I hope this was a very nice project to do. I enjoyed doing it very much, and I hope you learned something from it. Have an adventure. This is Paul-Octave or Bob Barville signing out.